The rise of Italian fascism, from the humiliation of a victorious nation to the shadow of Mussolini. Part 1. The humiliation of a nation among the victors. After the First World War, Italy did not collapse because of defeat. What brought it to despair was a far more bitter paradox. They won, but they were not honored. The Italians emerged from the war as a nation among the victors, but instead of pride, they felt only a humiliation that seeped deep into their hearts. They had sacrificed hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the freezing Alps. They had shed blood for the Allies, and in return, they did not receive what they believed they deserved. In the heart of Italy, an haunting phrase began to echo, a mutilated victory, a victory incomplete, a victory tainted with the bitterness of betrayal. And from that humiliation, the specter of fascism began to take shape. Part 2. The Treaty of Versailles, a slap in the face of Italian pride. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. Europe entered a new order. But for Italy, Versailles was not a reward. It was an insult. Earlier in 1915, the Allies had signed the Treaty of London with Italy. They promised that if Italy joined the war against Austria-Hungary, Italy would be granted vast territories. The Italians believed that promise. They plunged into the war as a gamble of honor. But when peace arrived, important lands such as Dalmatia or the city of Fiume did not belong to Italy. The Italians felt deceived. They fought like a great power, yet were treated like outsiders, a victorious nation yet burdened with the feeling of defeat. Part 3. A shattered economy, veterans returning in despair. But the problem was not only at the borders. After the war, Italy fell into a full-scale crisis. War debts piled up. The currency collapsed, inflation soared, factories shut down, unemployment spread. Millions of veterans returned home, but home no longer had a place for them. No jobs, no future, no one to repay them. The men who once held rifles for their homeland now became wanderers in poverty. Public morale crumbled. Trust in the state began to fracture, a society boiling in desperation. Part 4. The Two Red Years. Italy in chaos. From 1919 to 1921, Italy entered the period known as Biennio Rosso, the Two Red Years. Everywhere erupted. Strikes, protests, factory occupations, street violence. Workers demanded higher wages. Peasants rose up against landlords. Socialist and communist movements spread. The bourgeoisie and the elite were terrified. They looked to Russia, where the Bolshevik Revolution had toppled an empire, and asked themselves, would Italy be the next victim? In that era, the fear of communism became a shadow over the entire society. People no longer sought freedom, they sought order, an iron fist. Part 5. A weak democracy. Parliament becomes a farce. While society descended into turmoil, Italy's parliamentary government proved helpless. From 1919 to 1922, Italy changed more than 5 governments. Parliament became a place of endless arguments. No one could solve unemployment, inflation, political violence, the threat of revolution. The people gradually lost faith in democracy. They began to believe Parliament only brings chaos. We need a strong leader. And at that very moment, a man stepped out of the shadows. Part 6. Benito Mussolini, the man who awakened the dream of dictatorship. On July 29, 1883, in Predappio, a small town in the Romagna region, Benito Mussolini was born. From childhood, Mussolini was stubborn, aggressive, drawn to violence. As an adult, he became a journalist and a socialist activist. At first, Mussolini stood with the workers, but the war changed him. He supported Italy's entry into the First World War, and for that, he was expelled from the Socialist Party. From here, Mussolini began a new path, no longer a fighter for class, but a man hungry for absolute power. 7. The Blackshirts. Violence becomes a political weapon. In 1919, Mussolini founded a paramilitary organization, Fasci di Combattimento. At first, it was only a small group of unemployed veterans, radical youth, those who hated communism. But they possessed the most frightening weapon, violence. They wore black shirts, they beat their enemies, they burned union offices, they spread terror. These squads were called squadristi, the Blackshirts. Conservative elites began to fund them, because they believed better fascists than communists. Part 8. The March on Rome. when fear overthrows a nation. In October 1922, Italy stood on the brink of civil war. Mussolini launched his decisive strike. On the night of October 27th into the morning of October 28, around 30,000 Blackshirts marched on Rome, not to fight, but to threaten. They demanded Prime Minister Luigi Facta resign, Mussolini be given power. The Prime Minister proposed that King Victor Emmanuel III declare martial law, but the king refused, a fateful decision. On October 29, 1922, Mussolini was appointed Prime Minister of Italy. A coup without gunfire, only fear. Part 9. The Fascist State. Nothing exists outside the state. Mussolini quickly turned Italy into a dictatorship. He declared the slogan, "Nothing exists outside the state. Nothing against the state. Nothing can exist outside the state." He dissolved the opposition, controlled the press, turned elections into a formality, built his image as Il Duce, the supreme leader. Fascism seeped into every corner of life: schools, youth, media, society, a nation run by propaganda and fear. Part 10. Mussolini, Hitler's teacher. In the early years of the 20th century, two men were quietly rising. Mussolini in Rome, Hitler in the shadows of Germany. Hitler admired Mussolini. He copied Roman rituals, uniforms, paramilitary organizations, the philosophy of anti-communist violence, but Mussolini still regarded Hitler as only an extremist student until the balance of power shifted. Part 11. From leader to the shadow of Nazi Germany. In 1935, Mussolini invaded Ethiopia. Italy won, but Britain and France isolated it. While the West shut its doors, only Hitler opened his arms. From here, Mussolini gradually became dependent on Germany. 1936, the Rome-Berlin Axis was born. 1939, the Pact of Steel was signed. Mussolini understood clearly Italy was not ready for total war, but he was pulled into Hitler's machine. In June 1940, when Paris fell, Mussolini declared war on France like a man jumping in for scraps, a desperate act. From teacher, he became the follower. From Europe's leader, he became the shadow of Nazi Germany. Conclusion. The tragedy of a nation seeking glory through darkness. Italian fascism was not born from strength. It was born from the humiliation of a victorious nation, economic collapse, the failure of democracy, the fear of communism, and Mussolini's ambition. A people searching for order but choosing chains. A nation seeking glory but stepping into darkness. And from that moment, Italy's tragedy in the Second World War began. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it useful, don't forget to leave a comment and watch more videos on the channel to support it. Goodbye, and see you again in the next videos.